Have you ever been so mad you just wanted to fight someone? Andrew Jackson took that feeling to a whole new level. Today, we're breaking down the true story of how a horse debt, some nasty insults, and a whole lot of pride led to one of the most infamous duels in American history. So buckle up, because I am about to tell you the wildest story about the most unhinged president ever. By the way, I upload videos every week. So, if you enjoy this kind of content, feel free to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you won't miss a thing. So, back in 1806, Andrew Jackson was this hot-headed lawyer and landowner in Tennessee. He wasn't president yet. That wouldn't happen until much later. You see, Jackson had this reputation for having a crazy temper. Like, the kind of guy who'd explode if you looked at him wrong. Okay, so it all started with this horse race. A man named Joseph Irwin, who was actually Dickinson's father-in-law, made a bet with Jackson over a horse race. There was this whole misunderstanding about the terms of the bet. Like, was it in cash or in notes, which were sort of like IOUs? This might seem silly to us now, but back then, these gambling deals were a big deal. So anyway, Dickinson, who was this young, popular guy in Nashville society, sort of started bad-mouthing Jackson. And Jackson, well, he wasn't the type to let that slide. The situation kept getting worse because people in Tennessee were basically stirring the pot, kind of like when your friends get involved in drama and make everything 10 times worse. Things really heated up when Dickinson publicly trashed Jackson in a local newspaper, calling him a coward. Imagine if your Twitter beef got published in the news for everyone to see. That's basically what happened. And back then, that was the ultimate insult. Jackson fired back by calling Dickinson a worthless cur, which is basically old-timey speak for calling someone a lowlife. Not very creative by today's standards, but back then those were fighting words. Now, here's where it gets really serious. Dickinson crossed the line by talking trash about Rachel, Jackson's wife. See, Rachel had this complicated past where she thought she was divorced from her first husband when she married Jackson. But the paperwork wasn't actually finalized, so technically, they had been living together while she was still married to someone else. It was this huge scandal, and Rachel was super sensitive about it. When Jackson heard about Dickinson insulting his wife, that was it. Game over. In those days, if someone insulted your wife's honor, you didn't just tweet about it. You challenged them to a duel. You know how I said Jackson was furious about his wife being insulted? Well, here's the weird thing. He didn't immediately challenge Dickinson to a duel. Instead, Jackson kind of did something unexpected. When you're super angry, sometimes you get so mad that you actually become calm, right? Like scary calm. That's what happened to Jackson. So Jackson went to Dickinson and was like, "Hey, did you really say those things about my wife?" And surprisingly, Dickinson actually apologized. He basically said, "Well, I might have been too drunk, and if I did say that, I'm really sorry." And Jackson was like, "Okay, apology accepted. Problem solved, right?" Wrong. This is where things get messy. See, people around them just couldn't let it go. Jackson's friends were in his ear saying stuff like, "Are you really going to let Dickinson's dad get away with not paying you for that horse bet?" And then rumors started flying that Jackson was talking trash about Dickinson and his father behind their backs. So Dickinson hears these rumors and he's thinking, wait a minute, this guy accepted my apology about his wife, but now he's talking behind my back? So Dickinson sends a friend to ask Jackson if he was really talking smack. Jackson's response? Well, let's just say it wasn't friendly. He basically got super aggressive with Dickinson's friend, who then ran off and called Jackson a coward. And guess what? The newspaper published that too. So now we've got two newspaper articles where Dickinson and his friend are calling Jackson a coward. And back in 1806, being called a coward in the newspaper was like having a viral video making fun of you. Everyone saw it, and you couldn't just ignore it. That was the final straw for Jackson. He was like, that's it, we're settling this with a duel. Now dueling was actually illegal in Tennessee because, it's basically agreeing to try to unalive each other, which isn't great for public safety. But these guys were so mad, they decided to cross the state line into Kentucky, where dueling was still allowed. But here's where it gets even more intense. Jackson's friend pulls him aside and says, you know who Charles Dickinson is, right? And Jackson's like, yeah, the guy I've been fighting with this whole time. And his friend goes, well, he's also the best shot in Tennessee. Another person jumps in and says, actually, he's not just the best shot in Tennessee, he's probably the best shot in America. Can you imagine finding out the person you're about to duel is basically the Deadpool of shooting? Jackson must have been thinking, well, I'm toast. But instead of backing down, Jackson came up with a plan. So Jackson knows he's about to duel with basically the best marksman in America, right? And he's thinking, I need some kind of edge here or I'm totally done for. So Jackson comes up with this plan with his friend who's going to be his second in the duel. A second is like your backup person who handles all the arrangements. Jackson tells his friend, look, when you start the duel, say fire, really fast to try to make Dickinson rush his shot. And then Jackson decided to wear these really loose clothes to make himself a harder target to hit. I mean, it's not bulletproof armor, but he was working with what he had, you know? So the big day comes, May 30th, 1806. They're in this place called Harrison's Mills in Kentucky, just across the Tennessee border. There's a crowd gathered to watch because, well, duels were kind of like sporting events back then. Super messed up, right? The two men take their positions, standing 24 feet apart. Just imagine that. That's about the length of a living room. They're close enough to clearly see each other's faces while pointing pew-pews at each other. Kind of terrifying when you think about it. Jackson's strategy was pretty unusual. He decided he would just stand there and let Dickinson shoot first. Why? Well, Jackson figured that even if Dickinson was the best shot around, he'd be nervous and might miss. And then Jackson could take his time with his own shot. It was a huge gamble, you know? Like betting your life on red at a roulette table. So the signal is given and Dickinson raises his pistol and fires. The bullet hits Jackson right in the chest near his heart. You'd think that would be it, game over, but Jackson just stands there. He doesn't fall down. The crowd is shocked. What people didn't know was that Jackson was clenching his teeth so hard to keep from showing pain that he bit through his own lip. That red stuff that was supposed to stay in his body was soaking through his clothes, but he just stood there like a statue. Talk about tough. Now it's Jackson's turn. He raises his pistol, pulls the trigger, and click. The pew-pew stops at half cock, which is like a safety position. According to the rules of dueling, that should have counted as his shot, and the duel should have been over. But Jackson, being Jackson, was like, nope, that doesn't count. He recocks his pistol, aims carefully, and boom, shoots Dickinson right in the chest. Dickinson fell and called out, God, have mercy on my soul. The crowd rushed to help him, but it was too late. He died later that day from the wound. So after the duel, everyone was kind of shocked, you know? Some people were saying what Jackson did wasn't fair. That when his pistol misfired, that should have counted as his shot. The rules of dueling were super strict, and to be honest, Jackson definitely bent them. The thing is, Jackson didn't really care what people thought. When someone asked him if he regretted unaliving Dickinson, Jackson reportedly said, I would have stood up and been shot at by Dickinson even if I had known I would be unalived, so that I could have the chance to unalive him. Like, wow, talk about holding a grudge, right? As for Jackson's injury, that bullet Dickinson fired, it lodged just inches from his heart. The doctors couldn't even remove it because medicine in 1806 wasn't exactly advanced. So Jackson just lived with that bullet in his chest for the rest of his life. Can you believe that? He carried around a piece of lead in his body for another 39 years. The wound caused him health problems forever. He had chronic pain, coughing up red liquid stuff, and his left arm was kind of useless sometimes because of nerve damage. But Jackson was the kind of guy who just pushed through pain like it was nothing. You'd think unaliving a man in a duel would end your political career, right? Well, not for Andrew Jackson. Even though his reputation took a hit after the duel, he eventually became a war hero in the War of 1812. People started calling him Old Hickory because he was as tough as hickory wood. And then, in 1828, that's 22 years after the duel, he actually became the 7th president of the United States. I mean, imagine a presidential candidate today who had unalived someone in a duel. That would definitely come up in the debates, you know? Jackson's presidency was, well, let's just say controversial. He did some pretty terrible things, especially to Native Americans with the Indian Removal Act and the Trail of Tears. Some historians consider him one of the worst presidents because of these policies. But this duel with Dickinson really shows you what kind of person Andrew Jackson was. Stubborn, vengeful, tough as nails, and willing to do whatever it took to defend his honor and his wife's reputation. He literally carried the consequences of this feud in his body until the day he died on June 8, 1845. And that, my friends, is how one of the most savage men in history shot his way into the White House. Literally. But let me ask you this. If Andrew Jackson ran for president today, do you think he'd still win? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you liked this wild history story, hit that subscribe button for more crazy tales from the past. Until next time, take care.